One. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Spearfactor Spearfishing podcast. It's me, Brett, and I'm speaking with a very interesting man. His name is Leighton Crisp, and I kind of caught his attention because I noticed he was just in a part of the world that me personally I don't know much about, and it's always kind of caught my attention. And then he shared some pretty, it looks like amazing diving conditions and some really cool fish. So Leighton, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. Good to be here and good to meet you. Have the chat.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, because tell me a little bit about your background, like where you're from. I know we spoke before on the phone, and you seem to have kind of an interesting life where you go to some pretty amazing places. But before we get into that, I just kind of want to get some background on like who you are and how you grew up and all that stuff.
Yeah, sure. Maybe you can hear from my accent. Some people can or can't. I'm from South Africa originally. So I was up watching the rugby last night. South Africa playing the Kiwis, which difficult game to watch, but we ended up beating the All Blacks, which is nice. So I left South Africa when I was in my early teens. A lot of people left South Africa around that time. Due to my parents' work, moved to Germany for about 10 years. Did all my high school in Germany, and then didn't do too much spearfishing in Germany. Swam around in the lakes a bit, shot some catfish and some carp, but not really a place for spearfishing. And after school, I wanted to go somewhere warm and somewhere sunny, so I moved to Brisbane, Australia for university. And by that time, a lot of my family had left South Africa and moved across to Australia, some part of Australia. And did university over there. Got into spearfishing in Australia pretty much. Some of my cousins lived up on the Sunshine Coast, and I'd pop up there and go for a swing off the rocks with them, and kind of think that's where I had my first dabble at the sport. And then I worked in Australia for a couple of years and then moved to Southeast Asia for work, to Myanmar, Burma, for a couple of years. And I actually sold them as fishing gear because can't really do any of that over there. So pretty much gave up the sport for about 3 years. And then things in Myanmar started to get a bit difficult. There's some ethnic violence and genocide up in the northwest. And then I had to leave before the coup, luckily. And yeah, I was kind of hanging around, wondering what to do, thinking of taking a year off or something. And then this job came up in Papua New Guinea. So it's just timing was pretty lucky. And yeah, I just said, yes, I'll come. I had never been here before, but knowing the ocean and the remoteness of the place, I thought I'd take the job and came over here about 6 years ago and been here ever since, and still loving it.
So the Myanmar stuff is pretty wild, because ironically, I have a guy that I talked to. He's pretty good acquaintance of mine, but he goes down there and does reporting on all these like Syria and hostile areas, and he's told me some wild stuff, kind of wild stuff between the rebels and the whole thing going on down there. But what kind of work do you do?
So I work in banking, financial markets, but more on the global market side, so foreign exchange trading and just some of the economic reporting. Do all the economics and forecasts, currency forecasts, and that kind of thing.
So do you do like in those specific areas? Do you go there and then you just kind of work with like local like how does that work? Like, I know this isn't spearfishing related at all, so if you don't want to talk about it, it's fine. But I was just curious about, you go to these areas, and work with, get your feel of the market, in order to like report back to your main company, or what exactly are you doing financial wise in those areas?
Well, I'm more on the customer facing side, so I deal with the big multinationals investing in these countries, trying to help them with their foreign exchange needs and hedging solutions, and then also just to gather intel on what's going on in politically or in the economy, and just report back to the bank, but also to the customers. So it's mainly a customer-facing role. And that's why I get to travel around a bit here and see people in different places.
That sounds pretty cool, actually. Traveling's always nice, especially when you go to places like most tourists don't go, and you get to go there for some time like you do. I mean, you really get to see the true side of that area, not just like the resorts and all that stuff. What do you say, like, you grew up in South Africa, you left South Africa. Was that because of some of the unrest and issues they were having down there at the time?
Yeah, well, I think this whole situation became more difficult over time, and my parents didn't really want to leave. It's just they wanted a better future for their kids because they didn't know how things would look one day. So anyone who had the opportunity, or many people had the opportunity, just got out for their children's sake, just so they could have more opportunities. And most of my family's now in Australia, and there's a couple left, and those that are left aren't having such a good time. It's quite a difficult place to live still, and there's also that ongoing violence and crime that you always have to watch your back.
Right. And then I imagine getting to Germany was quite a culture shock to you, especially growing up in South Africa and then you're in Germany. How was that?
Yeah, it was a bit of a shock because we moved to a small town in southwest Germany in the Rhine Valley, not far from France, maybe 30-minute drive from France. No one spoke English, so my sister and I went straight into a German school, didn't understand anything. I actually grew pretty close to my dad during that time because we both didn't speak German, so we hung out quite a lot. Went fly fishing in the rivers for trout and kind of hung out. But it's a good place to grow up. It was a good country. Good education, stable. Just the weather, it's a bit cold, and I think life in Germany is a bit too regulated and a bit too boring for my like. So that's why as soon as I finished school, I wanted to move to somewhere else.
Well, I understand that completely. So how did you end up, getting involved in spearfishing? Obviously, probably from when you were a young age in South Africa. It's kind of part of the culture in certain areas, but how did you get wrapped up in spearfishing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've always been fishing. My dad used to fish off the beach. South Africa. We actually lived in Johannesburg, so that's nowhere near the ocean, big city. But once a year we'd go down to the coast and go stay remote areas and go fish off the beach. And then as a kid, I was always running around in the rock pools collecting fish. I still have a big marine aquarium today. I'm still fascinated with fish and just watching the reef grow and watching different kinds of fish, identifying fish. So I've always been interested in that. But no spearfishing in South Africa, even though there's a big culture spearfishing over there. People pretty good spearos over there. The conditions are quite difficult. Big tides and weather and sharks. But it was more Australia when I moved there for university. My cousins were living up on the coast, and they would take me out just off the rocks or swim off the beach, and we'd go out and shoot small fish. And I think I switched from fishing to spearfishing just because I didn't even mind if we weren't catching anything. It was just nice to swim around and see how things change. Even the same spot would be different on a different day. So it was nice to just get in the water and that's, I think, what got me hooked.
Yeah, 100% on that. I'm same here. There's nothing better than, just going for a swim. Even if you don't shoot anything, you still spent a day in the water. Probably learned something too just by watching. Where in Australia did you go to school at?
So I went to university in Brisbane, which is nice. It's a nice city, really nice weather, close to some good spearfishing spots up on the Sunshine Coast or down on the Gold Coast. So when I was at the university there, I joined a spearfishing club down on the Gold Coast. Had my first real experiences with some guys that are pretty skilled. Had my first kind of shocking experience spearfishing over there as well, which put me off for a couple of years. I'll talk about it a bit. It was our first proper spearfishing trip with the club out on a liveaboard boat up close to Gladstone, which is north of Brisbane. And there was a couple of really good divers, probably some of the best divers in Australia, and a couple of noobs like myself. And one of the guys was a really good diver, and he had a shallow water blackout, and he passed away. So that's all I remember on my first trip. Coming back to the boat and people doing CPR trying to revive this guy, and he didn't make it, and then we had to abort the trip. And I just remember going back to shore and just wondering if this guy is so good at diving, because I was quite new back then, and it really showed me the reality of the dangers of spearfishing. So I kind of stopped spearfishing for a couple of years after that. So I got the confidence to go back in the water.
That'll scare the shit out of you. Yeah. I know a few people that have had people die with them diving, or, were with them. Man, so do you mind talking a little bit more about that? Like what happened, and like kind of walk us through that, if you don't mind, because I know it's probably not an enjoyable thing, but to be from a new guy perspective, watching this, if you're not experienced with this kind of stuff, emergency situations, trauma, whatever, like that must be like a blur and just really leave an impression. Yeah, do you mind sharing that a little bit more about that story? That's terrible.
Yeah, sure. I think it's shaped the way I dive today, that experience early on. I wasn't diving with the guy who blacked out. He was partnered up with someone else. I was the new guy, so I was diving with some of the older, experienced divers who were very patient. And yeah, it was one of the days when it was maybe our third day, and we're diving for crayfish, lobster on some shallower reefs. And this guy was a really good diver. He was a triathlete, went down to 30, 35 meters, no problem. And then I think, to remember the story, he was just diving with this other diver, and he was going off on his own, and I think shot something, or his spear got stuck in the reef. I'm just thinking he was going down to try retrieve it without maybe breathing up properly. And then the other diver only found him after maybe 8 minutes, and I don't think she had trouble getting down to that depth. And then was able to retrieve him somehow, and went back on the tender boat to the main boat. And when we were driving back to the main boat, we just saw them doing CPR on the back deck. It was huge panic. I think they called the chopper out, but by the time the chopper was halfway there, had been too long, so they sent the chopper back. And one thing that stuck in my head as I looked up to this guy, I thought, wow, he's really a good diver, and I'm just a beginner. And then could kind of see myself flying there on the deck. And then I thought, what would that mean to my family? I'm doing a risky thing here, but it's not just about me. It's about the other people in my life. So that kind of shocked me for a bit, and to keep on moving him around to keep him out the sun. So all these things just kind of got stuck in my brain, and I just didn't think I was good enough to dive and not get into that kind of trouble out in the deep water. So yeah, that's when I took a break just to reassess and focused on other things. And then I think I didn't spearfish much again until I left Australia and came back again. So yeah, I didn't really dive for quite a few years after that.
First, thanks for sharing that story. I think it's important for people to hear that stuff, just because it's a good reminder. Because when we're young too, it's, you know, you always think you don't even fathom it until it smacks you in the face. So when you went to get back into diving, how would you say like it changed your approach to things, or how did you think it impacted you as a diver?
Well, I really only got back into diving when I'd left Australia, so I had no chance to dive or do spearfishing in Southeast Asia. I went and did my PADI freediver course in Thailand when I was living in Myanmar, just because I thought if I want to go back into the sport, I need to learn the rules. So, and I knew I was going to finish up and move to Papua New Guinea, so I thought I better get this course done just so I can learn the safety things, and so that I can at least have a clear conscience about having tried to do everything I can to do the sport safely. So I went to do the course, and it was really good. Like, I learned a lot. I still use a lot of the techniques today, how to breathe up properly, recovery, and some of the basic rules without buddy diving. So yeah, I did that course and moved to Papua New Guinea. And when I first got here, no one was really spearfishing. There was a couple of guys that I didn't know the locals yet out in the villages, but in the main city here, there weren't many spearfishing in, only one or two. So I just started to go out on my own and try and teach myself. And then I met a few guys and met some guys who were really pretty good, and just started to learn from there. But always with a big focus on safety. That's always my big focus, which I think kind of holds me back in some way sometimes. Always breathing up extra long and not going too deep, and always, if I can't be close enough to the boat, then I won't dive. So I'm always kind of not giving it 100%, because I'm always focused on the safety a lot, which just something that's stuck in my head.
Well, that's I think that's a good thing. That's how you become an old diver, you know?
Yeah.
No, that's great. Honestly, I think that's a message more people need to hear. And I think it's an interesting point you said. It's slowed you down a bit. But you know, it's like I tell like the younger kids I coach and stuff, it's like, it's the long game, you know. It's really just supposed to be about fun, and it's not fun to die. It's not fun to, you know, like you said, you thought about your family, and I honestly it didn't really hit that for me until I had a family, and then I was like, man, it's kind of selfish to do certain things, and then I changed roles in life a little bit. But so we got to Papua New Guinea. How would you describe Papua New Guinea in itself as a country, and then let alone the diving environment that you're diving in? Because I've seen snippets of it. I've seen there's fickled waves there, so I've seen surfing stuff there. I've seen a couple of diving, but it looks just beautiful. Yeah, do you mind elaborating a little bit on like just the country itself? I've also heard it's crazy dangerous with a lot of domestic violence in the cities, and was it 1 out of 2 women have been raped in the city or some crazy statistic? Yeah, so go ahead. I'll let you talk. It's your show.
Yeah, that's Papua New Guinea is an interesting place. It has a lot of perceived danger, so the rap it gets is maybe not entirely fair. So people I think it comes out as one of the top 5 most dangerous cities. That's Port Moresby, that's where I live, in the world every year, which I don't think is really fair. Johannesburg can be on that list, that's fine. But Port Moresby is a bit of a mixed bag. It's about knowing where to go and when to go there. I've been here 6 years now, so Papua New Guinea is let's say a lot of countries in one country. So Port Moresby is a city, and you can't really get anywhere from here without flying. It's quite rugged terrain. There's not much infrastructure, not many roads. So everywhere you fly, or most places you fly, are very different. There's the coastal regions where the people are really relaxed and live off the ocean. They very friendly, not much violence or crime. I think domestic violence problem across the country, which is something that has been a big issue even for us, with our business and across the country. But the coastal region's normally quite relaxed, and most of the islands are quite relaxed. Up in the highlands, it's very different as well. It's very high up. The tribalism is much more pronounced up there. So there's tribal conflicts that have been going on since forever, continue on to this day. So we'll have tribal, in the last 6 years, there's always some tribal conflict going on somewhere up in the highlands. In the big city where I stay, there's a lot of migration to the city, so tribal conflicts carry on in the city. So it could be different tribes from the highlands that continue on with their tribal conflicts in the city here. So, yeah, you have to kind of watch your back and have your wits about you, but if you know the place and stick to the right places at the right times, it's pretty okay. I once had a big fight outside my apartment. It was, I think, some dispute between 2 different factions, and they were fighting with sticks and knives, and then I pulled up to go in, and they split apart, let me drive through, and then continued their fight. So that's just a kind of example. They don't really always target everyone. It's mostly driven by the tribal differences rather than against everyone, even though there is petty crime and opportunist crime. I've been carjacked before a couple of years ago, where they smashed up all my windows and tried to grab me out the car. I was able to get out of that, but that was just a bad timing, going to the wrong place. Happened to be a hot spot for some tribal conflict, and got caught in the wrong spot. But other than that, I haven't had any issues.
That's hilarious thinking about it, having been in similar situations where it's like this melee. They're like, oh, hold on, Dad's here or something. You know what I mean? It's like, it's so funny. This doesn't involve you. Yeah, we know. Yeah, for us, it's like, we're the Americans. We're not getting involved in your shit. Wild. So as far as the diving goes, like on your Instagram, I mean, you have massive pictures of doggies and all of that stuff, and big coral trout and wahoo. As far as diving goes in Papua New Guinea, how would you describe it? Could you compare it to another place, or is it just so unique?
Well, I've only been diving in the Pacific, really. I haven't really been anywhere else. This whole region is amazing. So Papua New Guinea, I think, is one of the top. I was in Solomon Islands last week. I didn't have a chance to get out, but from what I hear from friends that have been diving there, that's even better than Papua New Guinea. But because it's so remote and there are not many tourists here, it's not really a top tourist destination. It's more like an adventure tourist destination. Most of the reefs and outer islands are quite untouched. The locals don't really always target the big doggies and big pelagics. They're more after the reef fish at night. They go with their homemade guns and shoot the parrotfish while they sleep, and that's how they find their food. So if you can figure out where to go and how to get there, it's fantastic. And just take some time, because it's not set up in that way. There are not many charter boat operators. Spearfishing is kind of still not a common thing for tourists to do. But once you figure it out and meet the locals and ask them, normally when I get to a new place, I just ask the locals, take me to the place where the big fish steal all your gear, or the big fish pull all the hand lines out of your hands. And they say, there. And then they take me and sort of try and swim around, and it's normally some big mackerel or doggies. And once you can get the moons and the tides right, it's normally most of the country is fantastic spearfishing.
That's awesome. So basically, with the moons and the tides you're talking about, with the doggies, do you like to go on like a low going high tide, or in a full moon, like around May-ish, full moon in May? Or what have you found to be like, if you don't mind sharing it, I mean, in that area, what have you find to be like a good time for doggies, and wahoo or any other fish, mackerel?
Well, off Port Moresby, we have great mackerel. The biggest mackerel I've seen anywhere in the country of Port Moresby, the capital, about 1 or 2 hours from here. We have some big river systems, and I find the big mackerel like to hang around the river systems. Out in the pristine reefs, haven't ever really seen big mackerel, maybe some small ones. We get big schooling mackerel through here most of the year. Just now from, say, May to November, it's our windy season. So it's super windy. It's anywhere between 25 to 35 knots all day long. So we don't go spearfishing much off Port Moresby. Now we go kiteboarding instead. It's fantastic for kiteboarding. I learned to kiteboard here just because I didn't know what to do during the windy season. But yeah, it's a great place for kiteboarding. But you can still spearfish around the country, because different places either get the wind or don't get the wind based on where they're located. So you can kind of go spearfishing any time of the year around the country. When it's windy season here, it's normally dry season in some of the islands, so it's a bit nicer to go spearfishing out there. For doggies, as usual, the more remote you go, the better. But I found I've gone to the same places at different times of the year, and normally when the water's a bit colder, it's easier to get them to come up. So if it's a bit warm, they tend to try and stay down deep. And normally when it's a full moon, I don't tend to see the big ones come up. And I don't know, I think maybe like the theory I had was that when it's a full moon, they may come up in the really early hours, or when the full moon is up and feed kind of just before light and just after dark. But normally when there's no moon, or just after a new moon, that's when I tend to have more luck with seeing big doggies come up.
No, it's interesting to say that, and the reason why I asked, because just north of you basically is Guam, and then other places around that area of that Western Pacific is very similar to tendencies, as far as like the colder the water, the better, and the big dogs, they'll stay deep. If it's too hot, certain times of the year when it's you just don't see them. But then I have friends that will literally fish deep and pull up like triple digit doggies, big dogs, deep, and then it's like, oh, they are here, you just don't see them. They're diving. Yeah. How about the mackerel? When you're diving near those rivers, is it murked out at all, or is it just kind of a hazy, or is it far enough off the the river base and it's still clear out there?
Well, it's sometimes hard to tell because it's a bit of a run. It's maybe 2 hours to the good spot. You got there before and you can't dive. It's just like 1 meter viz, 2 meters viz. I think that's just a that's just the investment you have to put in to try and find the right times, because even if it's not raining on the coast, we have quite high mountains, so it could be raining up in the mountains somewhere, so those rivers will wash out. But normally when it's a bit murky, so it's quite strange sometimes. It's a real weird thermocline where it's super murky on the top, and you make it down halfway, and then it's suddenly crystal clear and cold, with currents running in the different directions. So the top current could be running one way and the bottom current running another way. But the mackerel tend to like that greenish, murky water, and the bull sharks like it too. So you've always got that in the back of your mind, seeing in that dirty water. But yeah, all the big ones we've seen, like got a couple over 30 kilos, and they've all been in murky water where you kind of just shoot at a big shadow. And I think they also come in closer if it's not too clean.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. Sometimes with that, anywhere near river runoff, even if you think you're far enough away, what I've seen from my job, because we do scientific stuff, sort of, but we'll put salinity meters in, and you can see the salinity change. On the top, it'll be more brackish fresh water, and you'll get a haze, almost like with your mask. You think your mask is foggy, there'll be like a haze, and you dive down and it's clear, crystal clear. It's a little cooler. And then what it is it's the different salinity and the freshwater, colder freshwater, warmer freshwater coming off that way. We've had like vehicles we've operated, and they were ballasted for a certain salinity, and they were stuck at like 3 meters of depth because it was fresh water, which is less salinity, just floating there right below the surface. Yeah, it's pretty wild. But I imagine with that too, they're there because of all the murk, and the river runoff probably brings a lot of food for bait fish and all of that, and it just makes it much more enticing to a big animal. Kind of concentrates everything right there. Like you said, even the bull sharks.
Yeah.
Hey, were sharks there?
Yeah, I was about to say, Port Moresby not too bad. Mainly because I think some of the locals here fish for sharks with big drums. They throw out big hooks because there's a market for it. There's quite a big Chinese community that exports shark fin and buys the shark fin. So depends where you are in the country. Off Port Moresby, not too bad because a lot of them have been caught. But if you run far enough, you'll find the bull sharks and bigger sharks. There's other parts of the country where there's just way too many sharks. We went up on a 8-day trip to a remote part of Papua New Guinea in December last year on a liveaboard. It's an island called West New Britain, and about another 12-hour steam off that island to a super remote area, no reception, nothing out there. And we had trouble landing any fish over there. It's just sharks everywhere. So I think that's what it naturally looks like if there's no interference. It's a very healthy shark population.
Yeah, was there a lot of sharks there, or a lot of fish there as well?
Yeah, lots of fish, everything, lots of manta rays, turtles, fish. That trip we didn't see too many big doggies, lots of small ones around, but as you said, they were there, they just weren't coming up. I think if the small ones are around and the medium ones are around, the big ones are there. It's just trying to find that window. And sometimes the window's only an hour a day or 2 hours a day where they come up and feed. And if you don't know the area and you don't know when to be there, and it's not always the same, then you can end up not seeing any decent ones the whole trip. So it's all about putting in those hours and asking the locals and going out with the locals and spending some time. It takes a lot of time to figure that out. That's why that knowledge, you go to a new place and meet people who dive there, it's so valuable to catch up with the people that are based there and go out with them, which I try to do when I travel around the rest of the Pacific, try to connect with people and find out and learn from them and try and go dive with them if I can.
Yeah, those are wise words there. It's kind of a win-win to meet great people, and kind of you get an opportunity too to bring like gear to them or whatever they need to try to help them. And then so when you went out there on this trip, you said you just got like a scuba dive liveaboard and headed out there. Do you have a core group of buddies that you dive with now there?
Yeah, there's about 4 or 5 of us in Port Moresby. We dive together. So we've been diving together for a couple of years, and not all of us were really good spearos in the beginning, and I've just learned together and got better at it. And Port Moresby, PNG is quite a small place, even though it's a big country. Lots of people. They don't know the population here. They think it's either anywhere between 9 million and 17 million, but we can't really figure it out. Somewhere there's a lot of people, but everyone kind of knows everyone, especially in the diving fishing circles. So different parts of PNG, there's always people that you know that you've been diving with for a while. And it's a very tight-knit group and very supportive, because we don't have any dive shops here or spearfishing shops or anything. So we're always shopping for each other when we're traveling, or helping each other out with gear or trying to fix stuff. Because if something breaks or you can't fix it, then that's that. So we're always like trying to keep a supply of backup gear between us, and have a little, it's not an official club, but just a WhatsApp group where we share information and share pictures. So a good group of people.
Sounds like your standard foreign island WhatsApp group, like chat. Yeah, I love it. Everywhere else in the world, man, we got like the network built at WhatsApp. I don't know what people would do without WhatsApp. What a great network there. So Papua New Guinea, do you guys have saltwater? I know Timor does, but do you guys have any saltwater crocs there? Or are you out of the?
Yeah, we do. We do. You get one swimming off around Port Moresby every now and again, but a lot of them have been caught for food. Anything is food here, so anything that can be caught will be eaten. So there's a big population of Port Moresby, so not too many crocs. But off some of the other parts of Papua New Guinea, Sea Peak has a lot of crocodiles. That's another region of Papua New Guinea, or up in the river systems, lots of crocs. And often they also eat a lot of the locals, so they go out and try and hunt the bad ones that are eating the local villages. But yeah, we get the same big saltwater crocs that you do in Northern Australia.
Yeah, have you ever had a run-in with any of them, and while you're in the water, or just from? No.
Not. I wouldn't actually mind seeing one. It's would be an interesting experience, but no, never seen one. So
yeah, they like real life dinosaurs. I remember hearing about as an alligator. We get alligators here. It's like not here in San Diego, but in the south, and was doing some brackish water diving down there. You can't see anything, but they said, oh, it's a 6-foot alligator. I didn't think anything of it till I went to the alligator forum to see how big, thick a 6-foot alligator is. And I was like, oh, that's a problem. Yeah, it's definitely a problem. So, no, that's wild. So you're in that part of the country, or part of the world, excuse me. And then I know we talked before, you said you've gone to the Solomons. How is that true? How many times have you been to the Solomons?
So that was the first trip. No, actually, to be fair, I've actually crossed the border before. During COVID, I was stuck in Papua New Guinea, couldn't get out without doing 2 or 3 weeks quarantine in Australia, and then another 2 or 3 weeks here. So I just ended up not leaving the country, because it would have been 5 weeks of quarantine and real headache back then. So a few of us was just stuck here and decided not to leave. We traveled as much of the country as we could, and we went down to Bougainville, which is a region of Papua New Guinea which borders on the Solomon Islands. That's where traditional border crossing is. And it's only about 45 minutes on a small dinghy or banana boat, as they call it, to cross the border. And we're trying to go spearfishing in Bougainville because we thought it's so far away, it's going to be amazing. But we went on a 9-day trip, and this is South Bougainville called Arawa, and most of the reef was destroyed. It's really sad. They just bombed everything, so we couldn't really find much over there because I think after the Civil War, a lot of leftover ammunition, grenades have been used to just bomb all the reefs. So we kept on going further south until we got to the Solomon Island border, and it started to get much better, and it was becoming quite amazing diving down there. And that's why Instagram's quite useful sometimes, because I posted a picture of holding up a fish in Bougainville, and then someone that we have never met, but we follow each other, said, "Hey, I was there 4 or 5 years ago, here's a mark," and just sent me a mark on Navionics, but it happened to be across the border. So we snuck over the border to go check the spot out. I don't know, might be incriminating myself here a bit, but it's quite a funny story. Well, I'll talk about it. We as soon as we crossed the border with the Solomons, just a line in the water, it was suddenly amazing. The big fish everywhere. I had a big marlin swim up on my flasher. It was great. But the local guys that were going out with us were a bit worried because that border was being strictly patrolled. Solomon Islands took COVID quite strict, so they didn't want anyone across. But there was no one around, so we just went just over the border, had a swim around, and so good. So next day, we decided to venture a little bit further. The local boat skippers just made us lie down in the bottom of the boat and not show our faces, because it would been really obvious to see these white faces crossing the traditional border. And then the next day there was a little dinghy on one of the border islands, so we thought nothing of it. We all jumped in the water spearfishing, and next minute there's a big patrol boat that pulls out from behind one of the islands, 4 outboard motors on it, and we're like, oh shit. So try to jump back in the boat, motor back towards the border, pulling in our floats and our lines while we were going, hard racing. And as soon as we crossed the border, then the patrol boat turned around and then went away. And that would have been, say, the first venture into Solomon Islands, if that counts.
Oh, absolutely it counts. That's the best kind. That's the best kind. That's the best adventure. Yeah, something about those adventures just makes everything that much better, I guess. It's a good story, at least. Yeah. So then you recently went there, right? Just like last week or something, right? 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, last week.
Yeah, and you didn't get a chance to dive, though. But I have heard there's some issues going on there with between China and the Solomon. Did you know anything about that?
Yeah. Actually, it's Solomon's. I think a couple of years ago, the government switched to their policy to support mainland China, which was, blindsided Australia and the US. We thought the Pacific, we had the Pacific, and they, were our allies. And then Solomon Islands decided to not recognize Taiwan. And off the back of that, there was quite a few riots in the country. And they even burnt down one of our bank branches during those riots. And since then, I think the Australian government's really been trying to support the Solomon Islands and the whole Pacific. We've seen huge activity across the Pacific. Even the US, they built a big embassy here in Port Moresby, and building a new embassy in Vanuatu. I was in Vanuatu 2 months ago. So it's settled down in the Solomons, but there's a lot of Chinese there. So when you go there now, it's going to be hard to win that country back. I think Australia got a scare. It was about a year or two ago when a US Navy boat tried to dock to refuel something in the Solomons and got turned away because of the Chinese influence. So this is a real hotspot for geopolitics over here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny too because it's the last thing on a lot of people's radar. They don't even consider it, but working with the Navy guys, Vanuatu, there people are like, why? Like they don't even think about the significance of these islands. But if you look at World War II, Japan occupied all these islands as well, and they fought over. But it's pretty wild to think about. There's also a lot of drug smuggling going on through those islands, which is pretty wild because you don't even think about it. But yeah, so Vanuatu, because that's the one I wanted to talk to you about also, because I know you had mentioned that to me as well. How was Vanuatu?
Yeah, Vanuatu is really nice. It's great diving as well. Nice people. I would say Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, and you get down to Vanuatu, that's still the Melanesian region. I think the Melanesian region ends in around Fiji, and then it's the Polynesian region starts. So the culture is quite similar. The language they speak here, the Pidgin English, and the Bislama, which they speak in Vanuatu, is quite similar. If you understand the one, you can understand the other, same as Solomon Islands. The cultures, music is quite similar. They don't, in Papua New Guinea, they chew a lot of betel nut, which is the main thing people use here. And you see these red stains all over the street. And that's what people do here traditionally in Vanuatu. It's where the kava region starts. So people drink a lot of kava, which is quite a nice drink. Gets you quite relaxed in the, after a dive over there, a bowl of kava. It's quite nice to calm down and just relax the muscles. So it's a nice place. It's got that French influence as well. So funny story, when I was there recently, and I've been there twice now, and I got with a good diver, Jamie Reed. So he's a local guide there, and he's takes me and shows me around and took me to one of these little islands where it's still people live traditionally. And I was really surprised because I went over there and trying to speak my Pidgin and trying to talk to the locals, and the local chief speaking Bislama, and then he suddenly said something in French, and I can speak French because I lived on the French border, and his French was perfect. And these people to speak perfect French in this remote spot in the middle of the Pacific in this little island. So I found that really interesting, that they still keep speaking French over there. And very, very nice people. The water's quite cold, so you're eating like 3.5 mil all day long. And because of the cold water, the doggies come in really shallow. And you have some good chances in Vanuatu on doggies. So really, I highly recommend it. It's a good place to go.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize the difference between Polynesia, the Polynesians, how they look versus like when I was in Fiji. And I say it's like a more traditional, like they're darker skinned. They look more like our African Americans in our country, like more darker African lineage, where Polynesians are the more tanner, I guess, if you want to say. I don't know, I'm a terrible person with all this stuff, but it's like definitely two different subcultures. Like you had mentioned before, watching the All Blacks versus the South Africans. Well, we were watching the Tongans versus the Fijians the other day. I think it was 2 days ago, and my wife was like, "These are massive people. It's crazy." Being in Fiji, they were some of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. Just such good people. It's so cool. So so you notice the hunting for doggies in Vanuatu is a little bit shallower. I never thought about that, and I guess are they near a trench? Is that why they get the cold updwellings there? Is off the top of my head, I'm trying to think about it.
That's also a good question. I think they're also a lot further south. The water is quite cold there. Well, the last 2 times I've been there, the water's been quite cold all the time, anywhere around Port Vila or a bit further out of Port Vila. It's also very strange because this year I went to Samoa and to Tonga. In Tonga, the water was freezing, but Samoa, the water was really hot. So I think it must be due to how far south they lie and the times of the year I've been there, because this time of the year is kind of the cold season where we get a lot of wind here, and a bit of wind that goes through Vanuatu, those trade winds. The water here is never, this one talking about Papua New Guinea, is never really colder than 26 degrees Celsius. Don't know what that in Fahrenheit, but 26, 27 degrees Celsius, and gets up to around 30, 31 degrees during dive season.
I think it was 26 is 78 degrees here, which is fairly warm. I mean, that's no problem. But you said, how cold does it get down in Vanuatu? You said it was cold there.
Well, this may be showing how soft us Pacific divers are when they're cold. But when we say cold is maybe 22, 23 degrees Celsius.
Okay, so like, yes. No, that makes sense, though, because so 22 is 71 degrees for us U.S. people. And there's a massive difference between 71 degrees and 78 degrees. And then you said, 31, which is in the 80s for us. Like that's, we're sweating. I have a friend that was stationed in Kwajalein Atoll, and he said, eventually you get there, you have to wear a wetsuit because you just get acclimated to it. My friends in Guam, it's 81, 83, which I guess would be 28 degrees. Yeah, 28 degrees C. And you're wearing a wetsuit just because you get used to it. And you spend enough time in the water, And then the other thing that I found, which is kind of like a byproduct of being in paradise and diving all the time, was you're eating healthier. You're exercising more because you're out there fishing all the time. And for me, I'm away from my family for work. So it's like I got nothing to do but like go and play. Then you start losing weight. Then you start getting cold because you got no body fat. And then all of a sudden, 80 degrees doesn't feel like 80 degrees anymore. And then on the way home, I stopped in Hawaii where it's 75 and I had to wear a wetsuit. It was freezing to me. I just get used to it. No, but I understand what you're saying. And if you're going from 83 degrees to 71, that's cold. Yeah. Yeah. So, no, it's good stuff. And I imagine, the doggy's coming up shallow. That's kind of nice because most of the times, you got to push, 30 meters or, around that, I guess, to get him to come up, the big ones anyways. Now, very cool. What do you think are some things that, like, you've traveled to some really unique places off the, people would say dangerous places. What would you say some take-home things that, outside of spearfishing even, that you have learned through traveling to all these, kind of unique places?
Well, all these places across the Pacific, every country I've traveled to here, just the people are really, really nice. The local people, once you get to know them, they're genuine, they're happy to see you. The more remote you go, the more happy people are to see you and get to know you. And I really like that. I don't fancy going to big tourist destinations anymore because I just like that authenticity and getting to know people for who they are and maybe being able to contribute a bit. At all these spots if you get some fish, you share it with the village. Nothing goes to waste. But after living in developing countries and working in these places, I actually find it would be a challenge to go work and live back in sort of a developed country again, like Australia. It's really nice and everything's kind of perfect, but in places like this, you get to know people for who they are. We have real problems to deal with. We don't have too much political correctness. We don't have too many, we don't make problems out of nothing because there's a lot of real life problems to deal with. People are struggling to get home after dark. They're struggling to get food on the table. So everyone is just genuine and the problems you see are real. and everyone works together to try and sort out things. But that's what I find really nice. If people have the opportunity to get out to these remote spots and spend some time in the local villages, and it's such a good experience. And the people are really lovely and very happy to see new faces, and really are proud of their little spot of the world, and will treat you really well, and make you part of the community.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. I was hoping you'd say something like that. That's great. What would you say, diving wise, that you've learned just by your travels or your experiences in the last 6 years of really going like hard and diving? And honestly, even that event from when you were younger and the blackout, I know we talked about that, but just from living there and traveling, what do you think of some take-home points as far as diving goes?
Well, I think just always taking some gear with you, and even if you have nothing planned, because a lot of these, it's always good to plan a trip end to end, to have everything sorted out, have a good boat, have everything planned out, but it doesn't always work that way, especially in kind of these remote places. You just turn up, chat to the locals, they might know someone who knows someone, and my biggest regret is not always taking my dive gear with me every time, just because the opportunities pop up when you get there. And you should it's just keeping an open mind, if you will, about how a trip might end up, and where you might end up going, and being flexible in your arrangements, because here we have quite a few challenges traveling around this country. The airline cancels flights all the time, and you get stuck in different places. So I think just being flexible and having an open mind and getting to know the locals, I'd say that's key. And taking some time to, maybe not just dive, but also go and see the local villages and do some of the cultural stuff. I think every time I get to do that, sometimes the highlight of my trip wasn't spearing the big fish, but actually going to meet the local villagers, going to see their school, seeing some of their traditional dances and things like that. That's always really cool.
Yeah, 100%. That's awesome. So what would you say is your most prized fish that you've shot, as far as the significance to it and how much it means to you, or how proud of you, or whatever?
Well, there's two fish, I think. The one fish was the first mackerel I ever shot off my own little boat in Port Moresby, after months and months of trying to figure out how to do this. And no one really spearfished, and I found one friend who kind of spearfished, and we went out and made a lot of mistakes and kind of did silly things, but eventually spearing that first mackerel and bringing it home and cooking it, and that's my fish. I brought it home, I've cooked it, and I was really, really happy with that, because all the work paid off. And that was maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. And then after that, I'd say probably the big doggy I speared maybe 2 years ago in Milne Bay, which is right on the other side of Papua New Guinea. You fly across the mountain range, and I was out on a remote island there, and that was also my second trip there, and trying to figure out doggies. I'd only kind of started to figure out how they work. Mackerel is different. They're always around, and you just got to go out and you might find one. But doggies is a whole different ball game. And my first experience with doggies is just wrecked all my gear, bent my spear, lost a lot of gear. So then I had to really start to rethink this whole thing. I think spearfishing is one sport, and spearfishing big doggies is a different sport. You need different gear. You need to really be prepared, and you can't just hope for the best. You really have to be prepared and have good buddies with you. So I think when I finally landed my first really big doggy, that was very special. And after that, I was kind of lost that insanity about trying to hunt big doggies, because I finally got one, and then after that, it kind of became a lot more chilled about the whole thing.
Well, it's funny. I think your experience is not uncommon as far as shooting your first doggy and then having everything get wrecked. Yeah, I can speak to that as well. Yeah. So, how did you find that island that you wanted to go out to? You just were get some buddies. Are you like with you and your buddies? Are you guys essentially? Because I know this is how this worked out for my friends and I. Is like just look at a spot on a map and just try to plan a mission there, or was there anything else like significantly calculated when you were trying to plan your trips for doggies or anything like that?
Well, we always try to plan as much as possible, but just trying to find a window where everyone can go, and we can get a boat is usually the hardest part. That determines when we're going to go. So if the weather's always great if we can get good weather, but to try and plan around the weather and everyone's calendars and work-wise is a bit of a challenge. But yeah, we'll try and plan as much as possible. But normally when we get there, we spend a couple of days sitting around trying to find the right ledges with the right upwells and the right bait fish. And then a lot of the time, the first trip is just to figure it out. If you can get a big doggy on your first trip, you're really lucky. But the first trip's just trying to figure it all out and then come back again when the moon's right or when the currents are right. And yeah, with doggies, it's all about timing, and then when the timing's right and you figure it all out, then you're still only halfway there. You still got to spear it and land it, which is that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, no doubt. Yellowfin tuna. Have you had any sightings of yellowfin tuna out of there, or is it too warm?
No, we get quite a lot of good yellowfin here, even off Port Moresby. If you go out a bit further, and we've been out to a remote spot, which is kind of like 1/3 of the way from here to Australia, from Port Moresby. If you go out, it's about 12 hours on a liveaboard at 8 or 9 knots. And out there, one time we're out there, and there was just yellowfin as far as you could see, loud around the boat. Some of the guys were fishing and they just got sick of catching yellowfin, but none of us could really figure out how to spear that, because we've never speared yellowfin before. So as soon as we jump in and they drive back, spending the day on the back of the boat in your wetsuit in the sun, trying to jump in. And so that's still something that's on my bucket list, just to spear yellowfin. I've never really had the opportunity again, and I think that's a whole another ball game as well.
Yeah,
get in ahead of them or chum them up, and so it's just that's another experience that I need to learn from someone or have the opportunity to do that. But that's really sort of at the top of my list to try and get one of those.
Are they decent size yellowfin?
Yeah, they got some good ones on the other side of Papua New Guinea, which is on the side of Leighton. The city's called Leighton. They have some big river systems there, but they get some big ones from, I think, probably 60 to 80 kgs. So there's some big ones here. I don't know if they get those big 100 kg plus ones over here, but there's some good yellowfin over here.
Nice. Yeah, nice. So what's next for you? Like, do you have any travels or any trips planned or any goals you want to, I mean, obviously we talked about the yellowfin, but any other goals or things you want to try to accomplish in the next 5 years, let's say?
Oh, that's a big question. Yeah. Well, I've still a few spots I've got to get to in the Pacific. I'm going to Fiji in October, November. I've been there before on holiday, but just to a resort, but this is a work trip, so I'll try and explore there. I believe it's, you have to really get out to remote spots in Fiji to do good diving. It's not like St. Tonga, you can just dive off the main capital city and there's big doggies and sailfish and everything there. Samoa, similar, and Vanuatu. But Fiji, I think you have to get out a bit further, so I'll have to go on a scouting trip and figure it out. And then Cook Islands is one of the spots I've got to go to before the end of the year, so I believe that's pretty good for blue water. I've got some good fads out there, so take my gear with for sure and go. And taking the gear with on these trips, even though it's only sometimes a day or two that I get free if I stay over a weekend, it really helps me understand the country better. I'm always trying to argue that I'm not just going spearfishing, I'm actually going to understand the country better when I spend the weekend out on a remote island, because I get to see how the local people live, and that fishing and spearfishing is their way of life. So if I get to experience that with them, it really helps me understand and meet the people, get to know the country better. But yeah, just from a goal-wise, just keep diving, staying safe. I don't really have any big goals about fish. I just want to keep diving safe and going maybe a bit deeper in a safe way and meeting new people and making new friends and exploring more of the Pacific as much as I can. Solomon Islands is also one that I would like to explore next time and go out to the wider region and stay out there for a couple of days and see what that's like.
Yeah, dude, I love what you said. I think too it adds a more meaningful relationship with the people that you meet. It's much more in depth and more than a one-way relationship centered around fishing. It's just fishing's the catalyst to bring you together. But when you go and experience cultures and how truly unique and kind of cool every little island is around there, it's really something special. And we don't get exposure to that living in a more industrialized country. The people can be happy with nothing and what's really important, I love it all. It's great. I don't know if there's anything else you want to share with us, but it's only been an hour and a little bit, about an hour and 15 minutes, but it's been an absolute blast talking to you and your experiences living in some really uniquely amazing places. Is there anything less you want to say? It's your show for today, your episode. So if there's anything else you want to go for it.
Maybe one other bit of a funny story from some of the remote islands I've been out here to in Papua New Guinea. One thing that amazed me is that people don't eat raw fish. They only cook fish. So it's happened to me twice now that I've speared a tuna or something, it's a doggy or a little mackerel, and I've taken them to the beach, and on these villages there's always a big crowd of kids. They all run up and want to see all these things and see your gun and understand what you're doing. And then I always cut up the fish on a log on the beach, and then I have soy sauce with me and eat it right away. And they always run away and fetch their parents to show them this crazy white man who's eating the fish raw. And this guy probably doesn't know how to cook. And they just think this is the funniest thing ever, which I like to tell that story because it's quite funny how these small things makes it, it's so different. It's something that's twice as quite normal. For them, it's totally foreign. I managed to get a few people to try sashimi and not too bad. Saying this is an easy way. Don't have to go fetch wood. Don't have to make a fire. It's healthy for you. It was quite a funny little thing that I've noticed in a few places. Vanuatu and in Papua New Guinea. People just
very cool. Yeah, come look at the crazy white man. Yeah, stupid white man. No, that's awesome. Yeah, that's great, man. Yeah, best education in the world, traveling. With that, hands down, best education. Like you said, the political correctness, like really, like these people don't care about. They're just trying to live and be happy. That's amazing. I always call them first world problems where we have stupid stuff. It's like, okay. Anyways, Leighton, thank you for your time. And I'm looking forward to you posting some more crazy stuff. And I always appreciate you sharing information with me and vice versa, and sharing the love of spearfishing. And most importantly, honestly, the love of people and other cultures is pretty awesome. So I hope you guys all enjoyed this episode. And where can people find you if they want to reach out to you and ask you questions about Papua New Guinea or finances in other countries, Bitcoin, whatever? I don't know.
Well, Instagrams, I don't use Facebook, but I've got Instagram mainly for spearfishing. That's pretty much the only thing I put up there. But my name on Instagram is Lay Freediver, Lay, and it's been a good way to connect. I've met a few people across the Pacific and reached out to a few people, and it's the main way I've gone diving with people in different countries is because I've just looked for someone on Instagram, sent them a message, and they've given me a tip. It's a great community, the spearfishing community. People are really happy to help. And same way, if anyone's coming to Papua New Guinea or some of the other Pacific islands, happy to give some tips and connect whoever wants to come. And I really try to promote Papua New Guinea because it gets such a bad rap, as I said. But the country really needs visitors and tourists, and it's not as bad as it sounds. If you go and Google the country, you only see some bad reports, but it's a good place, and people should come have a look. And please reach out if you want to get some tips on where to go and how to get around.
Great. Leighton Crisp, everybody. Leighton, thank you for sharing your story again. Good shit, man. Awesome.
No, thanks, Brett, and hope to see you here some stage.